This is Anthony Elmore, downtown at the Martin Luther King Civil Rights Museum. It's Black History Month in Memphis. One of my reasons for founding the Proud Black Buddhist World Association is to stand proud because we as a people should be respected. Buddhist religion or Buddhist history is Black history. And I'm here today as president of the Proud Black Buddhist World Association to start my lecture to teach people, and especially African and African Americans during this Black History Month, that Buddhist history is Black history. So we hope that you sit back and enjoy this great Buddhist lecture. It's Black History Month in America. We in Buddhism, too, should observe Black History Month. Let's get into the lecture. The Gift of Rice Ghost Show, written by Nichiren Showman reads. It says, the true path lies in the fires of this world. It says, it also, the Golden Light Sutra states, to have a profound knowledge of this world is itself Buddhism. He goes on further and said, the Nirvana Sutra states, all of the non-Buddhist scriptures and writings in society are themselves Buddhist teachings, not non-Buddhist teachings. Further, he writes, when the great teacher, Milo, compared these passages with one from the 6th volume of the Lotus Sutra that reads, quote, no worldly affairs or work are ever contrary to the true reality. He revealed that their meanings and pointed out that although the first two sutras are profound, since their meanings is still shallow and fails to approach that of the Lotus Sutra, they relate to secular matters in terms of Buddhism. Whereas the Lotus Sutra explains that in the end, secular matters are the all of Buddhism. So ladies and gentlemen, when you study Black History Month and you get into secular matters, you are practicing Buddhism. It is not the kind of Buddhism that we teach where you go into the temple or you act like you are Japanese. And the more Japanese you act, you think you're more Buddhist. That's not Buddhism. Buddhism is practicing everyday life. But let's go further. Nichiren Shonen also states in the Go Show, the true entity of life, he says, exert yourself. In the two ways of practice and study. For without practice and study, there can be no Buddhism. He goes on further and says, you must not only persevere yourself, you must teach others to the best of your ability, if only a single sentence of praise. So we who practice Buddhism, not only should we practice and study, but we should teach others. So Black History Month is a good thing. But let's go further. Please understand that the way Buddhism is being taught in America, please understand that the way Buddhism is taught in America, that Black History Month runs counter to Japanese propagation methods in America. Because when you begin to study Black History Month, you begin to get a different view and understanding of history. So I'm afraid to say that many of the priests, the SGI leaders, they don't want you learning Black history because the Black history runs counter to the teachings that we've been taught and that we have been taught. But today, ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Elmore in Memphis, Tennessee, the brother, I'm going to lay it on you. The Gosho teachings, practice, and proof, it says this. Now listen to me very carefully. The Gosho teachings, practice, and proof reads, the words of various teachers are in themselves of no use at all. The Buddha gave strict counsel against following them with his statement in the Nirvana Sutra, quote, rely on the law and not upon persons. What does this mean? It means even the Nichiren Choshu high priest, you don't rely on him, you rely on the law. Even if it's Daisaku Ikeda, who is the Grand Buddhist Master, you don't rely on his words, you rely on the sutra. It says rely on the law and not upon persons. You don't rely upon Anthony Elmore, you rely upon the law. But in order to rely on the law, you got to, first of all, you got to study it. And if you study black history, you are in essence studying the law. Let's take this thing further. It says, in the Gosho, true aspect of all phenomena reads the Expedient Means chapter in the first volume of the Lola Sutra reads, the true aspect of all phenomena can only be understood and shared between Buddhas. This reality consists of what? Nature, appearance, nature, entity, power, influence, inherent cause, relationship, manifest effect, latent effect, and the consistency from beginning to the end. Once you begin to understand the Lola Sutra and the 10 aspects of the 10 worlds, you can begin to put things together and get a better clarifications of the Buddhist teachings. Let us use Buddhist teachings to explain Black History Month. When we explain Buddhist teachings, we mean we explain Buddhism from the standpoint of the Lola Sutra. The Gosho reads, since their meanings is still shallow and fails to approach that of the Lola Sutra, they relate to secular matters in terms of Buddhism, whereas the Lola Sutra explains that in the end, secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. In America, specifically in African American churches, you will find a tradition whereas millions and millions of black people are observing Black History Month. The Lotus explains that in the end, secular matters are the entirety of Buddhism. For those of you who are trying to check out Buddhism, many of you will take the time to listen to me speak on Buddhism because I'm a brother. Not only am I a brother, I am a proud black Buddhist. And there's a difference, ladies and gentlemen, between a proud black Buddhist and just a regular black Buddhist. You got black Buddhists, but you don't hear about those Buddhists because they ain't proud Buddhists. Or they ain't proud black Buddhists. But let's take it further. 2 years ago, a Japanese priest by the name of Shinji Iwaki came right into this very room. And that Japanese priest told me, he said, you must leave culture out of Buddhism. What that Japanese priest meant was, we must leave black culture out of Buddhism. Because as long as I left black culture out of Buddhism, then this man was superior to me. In the Gosho, the 14th standard says, there's no distinction between those who chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. So whether he's a priest or not, there's no distinction. The Gosho said, what happened when a sage chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and we chant it? Nichiren Daishonin says no difference. He said a gold that a fool possesses is the same gold that a wise man possesses. But let's take this thing further. What is the difference between Anthony Elmore who's a Buddhist, and many other African American Buddhists. Like, let me give you an example. Those of you saw the Tina Turner movie, and you saw Angela Bassett, beautiful, pretty Angela Bassett playing Tina Turner. Did you know that award-winning actress Angela Bassett has a BA in African American Studies from Yale University? Did you know that astronaut Mae Jemison, a physician, she in 1992, on the endeavor in 1982, she has a BA in African American Studies from Stanford University. Did you know that Michelle Obama, the First Lady of the United States of America, has a BA in sociology with the minor in African American Studies from Princeton University? Did you know that Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and all the great leaders, they studied black history? So why is it at your Buddhist temples in America, and why is it that the African Americans are not privileged to learn black Buddhist history? You're not privileged because black Buddhist history runs counter to the teachings that you learn. Now, let's take this thing further. There's a book called Malcolm X on Afro-American History. If you get the book Malcolm X on African American History, let me share some words with you exactly what Malcolm X said about Buddhism. He talked about Buddhism. Now, on January the 24th, 1965, these are Malcolm X's exact words. At a time even beyond this, there was a black-skinned people in India who were black, just as black as you and I, called Dravidians. They inhabited the subcontinent of India even before the present people of India even looked upon them as gods. Most of the statues, if you notice, have pronounced African features. You go right in India today, in their religion, which is called Buddhism, they give all the Buddhists the image of a black man with his lips and his nose, and even show his hair curled up on his head. They didn't curl it up. He was born that way. And these people lived in that area before the present people of India lived there. There you are, Malcolm X, teaching you black history. Yet you go to your temples in America, the Asians are not teaching you black history. Let me tell you a story. I joined an organization called NSA in 1974. And there's a Buddhist leader, it's called Daisaki Keita. Daisaki Keita wrote a book. And this is a fictionalized, semi-autobiographical story of the Buddha Shakyamuni. In that fictionalized book, Daisaki Keita said that Shakyamuni Buddha was an Aryan. I got a problem with that. Why did Daisaki Keita write that the Buddha was an Aryan? Because it's convenient. It's because this is his mindset, not to teach you or have you inclusive of your history. This is what they're teaching. They're not going to teach you black history, because black history runs counter. If you study black history, you know that the Buddha Shakyamuni was not an Aryan. He was from the indigenous people. They called them Dalits. Let's take this thing further. There's a British historian. His name is Godfrey Higgins. He had a book that was written in 1833. The book is called The Anoclipsis. It is the story of how religion started. In the book, The Anaclypsis, Godfrey Higgins, a real historian, he's not like Daisaki Kato who wrote some semi-fictionalized story. Godfrey Higgins writes this about the Black Buddha. He says, but there is one circumstance of very great importance which is peculiar to Buddha and forms a discriminating mark between him and Krishna, which is that he is constantly described as a Negro, not only with a black complexion which agrees with Krishna, but his woolly hair and flat face. Mr. Cruz observes that the Black Buddha with frizzed and curly hair attaches himself at the same time to the three systems into which the religion of India divides itself. He says, Mr. Moore, on his woolly head, some of the statues of Buddha certainly exhibit thick Ethiopian lips, but all woolly hair. There is something mysterious and unexplained connected to the hair of this and only this Indian deity. The fact of so many different tales have been invented to account for his crisp, woolly head is alone sufficient to excite suspicion that there is something to be concealed, something to be ashamed of, more than meets the eye. That's what Godfrey Higgins writes about the Buddha. When you look at the Buddha statues, what you see is that you see that black, curly black hair. Now, in 1980, I went to a culture festival. It was the NSA Culture Festival at Madonna Temple. In 1980, it was called Capture the Spirit. And Buddhist leader Daisaki Kato, who was my hero, Daisaki Kato came to America and he says, I am going to teach you Buddhism and I'm going to bring you leaders. Daisaki Kato brought us an America gift. He brought young Japanese leaders from Japan to teach us Buddhism. In Memphis, Tennessee, they brought in a Japanese leader by the name of George Kusaba. George Kusaba was a Tennessee Territory leader. And what that man did, now this is 1980, George Kusaba came in and we had 300 African Americans practicing Buddhism in Memphis, Tennessee. George Kusaba came in and the first thing he did was broke the South chapter of Buddhism up with South chapter. And man, we was cool. We was rolling, man. We had these great, fantastic meetings. We were the black folk in Buddhism, South chapter. But what George Kusaba did, he says, no, I'm going to teach you something different. He broke us up into little Hans. And I said, why we want to be broke up in little Hans? I love going south. I was a young man. I wanted to go down there and be with the pretty women. But this dude came in and broke us up. And he developed a whole new paradigm in Buddhism. In 10 years' time, in a decade of George Kusaba, you look around and all the black folk left Buddhism. And those who were practicing began to speak in Japanese accents. They began to speak in broken language. They changed. In fact, in Chicago, there's a guy by the name of Mayor Wright. in Chicago. There was a guy by the name of Aaron Billups in Philadelphia. He was a territory leader of both black and white of over 30,000 people. There was Sam Harris in Atlanta. In fact, Sam Harris came to Memphis, Tennessee. I said, Sam, do you see what's going on? Do you see what they're doing, man? This is racism. Sam just didn't say nothing. But in March of 1991, I couldn't take it no more. I wrote a letter to SGI friends, and I says, I have to leave because what Dasa Kikeda did was he conquered us. He conquered the culture of black people. He turned around and marginalized the leaders, took away all the black leaders in Buddhism, and took away your thought. He centralized Buddhism, and all your thinking was going to just one man. That's Kikeda. But let's take this thing further. If, or Black History Month, you must get a sense of history. Let me give you a sense of history of Black History Month that you can understand and that you can touch upon. In 1965, there was a Buddhist man, he's a Zen Buddhist practitioner who lived in Vietnam. His name was Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King explaining his position about the war. This is in 1965, a Buddhist. In 1966, Thich Nhat Hanh met with Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, we in Buddhism use the word nam, devotion. During the Vietnam War, the Buddhists did not have a voice. You talk about the American military-industrial complex spending millions and billions of dollars in Vietnam, killing people. Thich Nhat Hanh didn't take sides. He said, we don't want war, we want peace. And what those Buddhists did in Vietnam, they set themselves on fire to protest. All over the world, you saw images of Buddhists setting themselves on fire to protest because they want their voice to be heard. This is the history of the Buddhists that I understand. And then you have some little punk priest, Shinny Wonky, comes in to tell me something about some culture. How can you tell me something about culture when you ain't never did nothing? You got an American Express gold card, come in and rent a car, wrinkle-free priest outfit. You not like Thich Nhat Hanh. In 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King, after meeting with Thich Nhat Hanh, this is April the 4th, 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King gave a speech at the Riverside Church in New York. Dr. Martin Luther King came out against the Vietnam War. Dr. Martin Luther King was quoted. He quoted a Buddhist. In 1967, on April the 4th, he quoted Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, each day the war goes on, hatred increased the hearts of the Vietnamese, and in the hearts of those with humanitarian instinct, the Americans are forcing even though they're friends into becoming their enemies. It is curious that the Americans who calculate so carefully on the possibilities of military victory do not realize that in the process they are incurring deep psychological and political defeat. The image of America will never again be the image of revolution, freedom, and democracy, but the image of violence and militarism, unquote. This is what Martin Luther King said about a Buddhist on April the 4th, 1967. Now let me ask you a question. What was Daisaki Ikeda at in 1967? Now, in 2007, you find Daisaki Ikeda donating money to Morehouse Cottage to put his image on the wall. He gets a brother to go around and have this Ikeda, Gandhi, and King Institute photograph, talk about peace. Where was he at? I don't remember him saying anything about the Vietnam War. I don't remember him saying anything about discrimination against black people in America. I don't remember Daisaki Ikeda or no Buddhist leader saying anything about Nelson Mandela getting put in prison when they came with the viciousness of apartheid in South Africa. See, once you begin to study history and you understand history, then you look at things just a little bit different because history will show who you were. Let's take this thing a little further. In 2003, I had just came from Taiseki Temple in Japan, and there was a meeting in Memphis, Tennessee, held by Reverend Murata, who is the chief priest of the temple in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. to this day. I asked Reverend Murata an intelligent question about Buddhism. Let me share something with you here. Have you ever heard of UNESCO? That is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. There is a Buddha statue in Japan called NARA Daibutsu, or the Cosmic Buddha. This Buddha statue is recognized as a part of Japan's national treasure. Now, what is a national treasure of Japan? It says a tangible cultural property is considered to be historic or artistic value, classified either as buildings and structures as fine arts and crafts. Each national treasure must show outstanding workmanship, a high value for world's cultural history, and exceptional value for scholarship. Can you imagine that one of Japan's most sacred treasures, the largest indoor Buddha statue in the world, is that of a black Buddha? I mean, the Buddha is black. He got that nappy hair. We in America, we're brought in as slaves. They said you didn't have no history, you didn't have no culture. But right in Japan, a part of their national treasure is a Buddha statue, the Cosmic Buddha. But yet I asked Nichiren Shoshu priest, Reverend Murata, and he says, I don't deal in racism. Instead of talking to me intelligently, you ask this man a question about the National Historic Monument, the largest and one of the oldest in Japan, and he calls it racism. No, he racist because he understood. I asked Reverend Shinji Iwaki about it. He says, I don't know anything about it. These dudes got right in my face and told a lie. Obviously, they don't want Africans and African Americans and black people to learn the history of Buddhism, because if you learn your history of Buddhism, you look at things a little bit different. See, when I dealt with Reverend Iwaki, I understand that you're a priest, and I understand that you're a holy man and all that, but I understand history. I understand that after Dimmak Temple in Nubia, Sudan, my ancestors practiced Buddhism 1,500 years before Buddhism ever came to Japan. See, you look at things a little different when you understand your history and you understand your culture. But black Buddhist history and culture does not sit very well with the Japanese teachers. Let's take this thing a little further. You know, I am a Nichiren Buddhist. Nichiren Shonin was a great priest. And Nichiren Shonin has great teachings. It is not Nichiren Shonin that extricated black history from Buddhism. It's the Japanese who now, 750 years later, bring Buddhism to America, and it's they who extricated the black history out of Buddhism. It wasn't Nichiren Shonin. We can show you empirical evidence of black history in the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha. However, when it comes to Nichiren Shonin teachings, these guys just slide it right on by. But let me show you, ladies and gentlemen, how Nichiren Shonin actually gave us an indication of his spirit, of his heart. He taught black history in Buddhism, but because you're not being taught properly, you don't see the black history in Buddhism. Because why? They're not going to teach you why. Because it was counter to their teachings. In the Ghost Show, Banishment to Sado, written in 1271, Nichiren writes, Nichiren is the son of a Chandala family who lived near the sea of Tojo in Awa province, in the remote countryside of eastern part of Japan. In the Ghost Show, a letter from Sado, written a year later in 1272, Nichiren writes, how much more true this is of Nichiren, who in this life was born poor and lowly to a Chandala family. In the Ghost Show, True Object of Devotion, written the next year, in 1273, Nichiren writes, if a consort and a king were to conceive a beast, her baby would be inferior to a Chandala. Now, in the Ghost Show, No Safety in the Threefold World, written in 1276, Nichiren writes, the Maya Sutra reads, imagine, for instance, a flock of sheep being driven by a Chandala to the slaughterhouse. Now, I'm showing you that Nichiren Shonin understood the word Chandala. The one thing that Japanese Buddhist teachers got wrong, that black people or African and African Americans should make a note, is the word Chandala. If you do not get anything else from this lecture, of Anthony Elmore. If you don't get nothing else, Anthony Elmore wants you to understand what is a chandala. Because the Japanese, as they tell you about chandala, they get it wrong. You know, there's a Nichiren Shu priest. Her name is Mukei Shonin. She's the first African-American woman who became a priest in the Western world, and we're very proud of Mukei Shonin. But I want Mukei Shonin to tell people about the chandalas, because Nichiren Shoshu don't do it right, and the things I read in Nichiren Shu, I did not really get a clear understanding or a proper understanding of what a chandala is. In fact, if you look on the web, there's a priest, a Nichiren Shoshu priest by the name of Reverend Komuro. He writes this about the chandala. In ancient Indian society, chandala referred to the lowest class of people in charge of butchering animals. Shakyamuni, who made his advent into the world 3,000 years ago, and Tentai in China and Dingzhou in Japan were all born into royalty. The highest classes in their respective societies, they were born into royalty so that their normal position would easily enable the people in society to believe in true Buddhism. Among the founders of Buddhist sects in Japan during the lifetime of the Daishonin, Honen of the Jodo sect, for example, was the child of a wealthy, powerful family. Isai, well known as the founder of the Ritsoi school of Zen, came from the heritage, steeple, and Shinto shrines. Moreover, Shimran and Dogen were both born into nobility. I challenge you to read all the Nichiren sects of the world of the word chandala. They don't tell the story. Now, I want you to notice something. I want you to do something. If you Google the word chandala, Anthony Elmore wrote about chandala 15 years ago, and I got it right. I got it right. They didn't get it right. I got it right. Because they are not telling the whole story about a chandala. They're not teaching black history. That's the reason why Nichiren Shonin said, I am from the chandala family. They say, oh, he means he's a fisherman. But in the Ghost Show, Banished to Saldo, written in 1271, Nichiren is the son of a chandala family who lived near the sea of Tojo in our province, in the remote countryside eastern part of Japan. In the Ghost Show letter written in 1272, Nichiren writes, how much more true this is of Nichiren, who in this life was born poor and lowly to a chandala family. Now, listen very carefully. Listen to the words of Nichiren Shonin, who in life was born poor and lowly. He tells you that he was poor and lowly. What the Japanese get wrong and perfectly ignore is the word chandala family. The word chandala does not mean poor. Shaka. The word chandala does not mean poor, Alan Phillips. If I were to write that my family was a poor Mississippi sharecropper family, that could mean that my family could have been black or white. Because both black and white in Mississippi sharecropper farmers, this could happen. My great-great-grandfather, name was Isaac Peterson. Granddaddy Ike was born a slave. He lived in a place called Morgantown, North Carolina. And when he grew up, slavery was over with, and he came to Benton County, Mississippi, where my folk was from. So if I tell you that my family was a slave, you know that I'm African American. And the same definition goes through Chandela. If you as a Nichiren Buddhist read the explanation of Chandela, you would just run right past the word Chandela and never give it a second thought. Now, listen to me very carefully. For those of you who have the major writings, Volume 1, please turn to page 37 on the Ghost Show, Letter from Sado, and read the paragraph and skip to the first line that reads, Nichiren, who in this life was born poorly and loaded to a Chandela family. Please skip down to the footnote, number 14, that reads, Chandela, the lowest caste, or lower than the caste system in India, comprised of those whose profession required them to kill living creatures. The Daishonin was born into a fisherman family. Can you get a load of what this Japanese dude write? Can you tell a brother whose ancestor was a slave, say, well, his profession was picking cotton? Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to read the SGI footnote. It says, it says, now, in the major writings, Volume 1, on page 37, the footnote says, Chandela, the lowest caste in the caste system in India, comprised of those whose profession required them to kill living creatures. The Daishonin was born to a fisherman family. Can you imagine that in the SGI book they said the Chandela was a profession? That's just like saying that picking cotton, a slave who picked cotton, he had a profession of picking the cotton, and his profession was waiting on white people, and that was a profession. Can you imagine? That's the same thing, ladies and gentlemen. When you study Buddhism, and you study outside the paradigm of black history and black culture, you are not going to get the true story. Now, Q, you the cameraman, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening to you. Now, Q, I just want to let you know, Q, that the Chandelas were the black people of India. Now, this dude gonna call a Chandela a profession. Yeah, the profession was a living hell because they treated people as subhuman. A Chandela was not a human, he was subhuman. Now, let me tell you a little bit, Q, let me tell you, and tell those who are listening a little bit about the Chandelas. A Chandela was not even in a class. He was called the untouchable. And these are the black people of India. They were called untouchables. What that meant was, when you said untouchable, they mean untouchable. That these people could only come out at night because what their shadow was polluting. That means people of the whites could not walk on the shadow of a sutra or chandela. It also meant that when they walk, they had to tie a broom on their ass. Imagine, right here, You got to tie a broom on your ass because you could not let people see that you've been by there. You had to walk around with a broom on your ass. You could not come out in the daytime because your shadow was polluted. A chandala was a person who had to tie a cup on their neck because you could not even spit on the ground. Now the rules for a chandala was, if a chandala were to look at the food of a Brahmin or a white person, you just look at your food, then you can't eat it, you got to throw the food away. A chandala could not look in the eyes of a Brahmin, because if you look in the eyes, the law was you pluck his eyes out. If the chandala were to ever hear the words of the Vedas, or the sacred teachings of the Hindu and Brahma's teachings, that chandala was to have molten coal, iron put in his ears. This, ladies and gentlemen, was a group of people in India. They had the worst inhumanity against humanity ever in the history of human existence. And yet, you got people who are teaching, don't teach this. They never say anything about how these people were treated. They're not looking at how bad these people were treated. They never thought they never had no compassion for the chandalas. Even today in India, these people, they call them Dalits. They call them Sutras. They call them slum dogs. And there are underclass who have a life of discrimination. We brothers in America don't have it as bad as our brothers in India. And yet, we who learn Buddhism have no idea about our brothers in India who are chandalas. But it was Nichiren who wrote in the Go Show that I am of the family of chandalas. So we who are Nichiren Buddhists, these people who are teaching Buddhism, they don't teach Buddhism in a way of equality. They're not going to give your child the opportunity to be proud that in Japan, on the National Historic Register, there is the Cosmic Buddha. Brothers can see the Buddha all over Japan. And whenever you see a Buddha statue, most of the time, he's got a hair like mine. He's got hair that's black. Because why? The Buddha, Shakyamuni, historically, the historical Buddha, he comes from a line of warriors who were indigenous people. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end this lecture, and I hope that those of you would get something. I hope that you understand that as a Nichiren Buddhist, Nichiren was not like the people of today. Q, I want you to zoom in a little bit. I want to show a few things. No, leave it right there. On the Gohanzan. On the Gohanzan. Those of you who are listening to my lecture, on the Gohanzan, Nichiren Shonin, who was a messenger of Shakyamuni Buddha, he made sure that black history is included in the object of worship. And on this Gohanzan that we chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyoto. If you look on the top left, that's Bishaman, Tenno. That is a black Buddhist god. They call him the Black Warrior. Nichiren Daishonin put the Black Warrior on the Gohanzan. Nichiren Daishonin put Fudumyo on there. Because, why did he put Fudumyo on there? Because the shogun of Japan was an African descent. He was an ancestor to the Anu people of Japan, the shogun. So when you look at Japanese history, the ancestors to the Japanese people, the Anu, the Africans came to Japan first. And they were the indigenous people and ancestors to the Anu. There is so much Buddhist history. When you look at Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, these were black people that they have written out of the Buddhism. But in conclusion, we have the wonderful and beautiful Lotus Sutra that we follow. When you follow the Lotus Sutra, you are actually following the Buddha. So ladies and gentlemen, the most wonderful and beautiful thing that we have is the Lotus Sutra. And we can teach the Lotus Sutra. We can teach greatness. So whatever dreams that you have in life, or whatever goals that you have in life, it's not big enough. When you can chant Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, see, the Go Show is very clear. The Gohanzen is found only in the mortal flesh of those of us who embraced the Lotus Sutra and chanted Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you very much.